Welcome to the Executive Forum Speaker Series from Purdue University's Daniels School of Business. I'm your host, Dave Randich, and I'm a lecturer here at the Daniels School, teaching undergrads on the West Lafayette campus. Executive Forum brings students and industry leaders together. Our speakers inspire our students and the public with insights on trends in their industry and guidance for students as they develop their business leadership skills. Today, we welcome global corporate finance expert Melissa Napier, CFO of the Grocery and Snack segment for Conagra Brands. Come along with us as we build the future of business.
Melissa, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the Executive Forum.
Thank you. I am excited to be here.
Why don't we talk about your segment? So you come from the food industry, specifically consumer packaged food. Tell us about that big economic segment and where your firm fits in there.
So, anytime you go to a grocery store, you go to a Target or a Walmart, you go online and order food from Amazon or Sam's or Walmart's online services, chances are you have encountered Conagra products. So we are a fairly large food company. My segment is the grocery and snack segment. It's about a $5 billion segment. It's operating really completely domestic. We also have three other reporting segments, our refrigerated and frozen segment, which is also about $5 billion. And then we have a food service and an international segment. International, very largely Canada and Mexico. And then we have a small global markets business, which is export. Those two businesses together probably round up to a little under $2 billion. So about $12 billion in total. My segment would be the things that you find when you're walking down the center aisles of the grocery store. So I've got three distinct businesses in my area. I've got our true grocery, so brands such as Hunt's tomato sauce, tomatoes, canned tomatoes. Vlasic pickles are probably two of our more well-known brands. And then some more fun brands, as I say. Our sweet treats and baking, so Duncan Hines, which is cake mixes. Swiss Miss, hot cocoa. Sound familiar? See some nods, great. Our snack pack pudding. And then our snacking, our meat and salty business, which is Slim Jim. We have a new acquisition that we did about a year ago of another meat stick company called Fatty. It's a bit of a cleaner label product. Orville Redenbacher popcorn, nods, Act 2 popcorn, Angie's Boom Chicka Pop, all ours. So it's great fun because every day I see our products in use, right? If you stop you're taking a road trip, some of you may be driving home, you go to a convenience store, chances are you're gonna see our products. As I said, you go to the grocery store, you'll see our products, you go online, you see our products. Food is fun. It's very fun to work for a company where you have a tangible product that you actually can visibly see.
Yeah. And if we think about the broader segment in the economy of food and consumer packaged goods, what kind of trends are you seeing from your consumers right now that we might be aware of from the news?
Yep. So some of the trends that you're seeing, and maybe I'll talk two things. I'll talk growth, and then I'll talk cost, if that's okay.
Of course.
So on the growth side, what we have seen over the last few years is a trend towards snacking. So people typically eating less 3 meals a day and snacking or grazing more frequently throughout the day. So in order to meet that need, you have to think about your packaged sizes. So what types of products are more convenient for snacking? So buying a meat stick, buying a bag of seeds, buying a bag of popcorn, smaller bags, larger bags, depending on your occasion, versus sitting down to a full meal. So that is a trend that we are continuing to see, and our snacks business is one of the two areas that Conagra has called out as a focus area for us that we intend to grow. The other trend that you're seeing from consumers is a focus on clean labeling. So we, as many packaged good companies, have announced that we will be removing artificial dyes and colors from our products. We have a timeline to do that by 2027. may sound easy, but it's actually a pretty complex process because you have to think about the formulation of the product. You have to make sure that if you're taking something out, you're not impacting the quality of the product, the taste of the product, the formulation of the product, packaging itself too. And then on the cost side, the other trends that we are continuing to watch that our end consumers are focused on, value orientation. So you're all in business school, you're all seeing economic news. There are large portions of the population that are strapped, right? Consumers are really looking at where to put their dollars. They want to put it in two areas. They want products that can last. So think if you're trying to feed a family of 6 people, chances are it's going to be much more economical for you to do that using a home-cooked meal versus going out to a dinner. And if you're doing a home-cooked meal, you may be more interested in buying a bag of pasta and a jar of tomato sauce, where you can get multiple meals out of that.
And so when you're running a large company, you're easily in the S&P Fortune 500, and you see trends moving more towards clean label, as you say, no dyes and so on, healthy, maybe value. What does that mean for a large corporation? How do you pivot to that type of activity without cannibalizing and destroying your legacy business?
So within Conagra, as in many large corporations, and I did not share our peer set, right? So when I think about who are our peers, it would be companies like a Kraft Heinz, General Mills, McCormick, Smucker's, Campbell's, all companies that Hormel maybe, if you're walking down a grocery store, these are names that you're going to see on the back of all the products if you look at the back, and I always look to see who's manufacturing certain things.
Yeah.
So in our company, we have various groups within the company that do different things. We have an R&D group, which is focused on product formulation. We have a very robust innovation process where we are getting external inputs on what do market trends look like. So where are consumers interested in new products? What spaces are growing? Is the snacking space a growing space, or is it contracting? We look at where do Conagra's brands fit within those spaces. So are we growing share of a shrinking pie, right, where we could be taking market share, but the category itself is declining? Or are we participating in those areas where market share is growing? We want to be participating in those areas where market share is growing. But also, for some areas where we have a leading market position, we want to maintain that market position. So Dave, I think it's a constant balance of continuing to look at the products and the brands that are growing in sales, that are growing in margin, and using some of that to fund new ideas and new innovation in other areas where maybe we don't have as established a presence and we want to continue to grow.
That's terrific. And one of the things I talk to my students about is, from my own experience in large corporations, there's very few people who actually understand the consumer and what's driving the consumer and what's driving R&D and new product development. There's usually a small group of people within a large organization. How do you keep that spirit alive inside of Conagra? So do you really know the customer? Do we really understand? And who does?
We do a lot of research, and we have a lot of data that in all of our teams we are looking at on a fairly regular basis. So I'll talk about two areas. One, we have a group within our company called Demand Science. I personally think our Demand Science group is something that sets Conagra apart. I haven't seen anything similar to this in other companies that I have worked at. What Demand Science does is they work a lot with external research organizations to monitor those trends. So every quarter, we have our external org partners come and speak to us about broader economic conditions. So they'll talk about broader consumer categories, not just food. and where people are spending money. And they'll break that into different demographics. They'll break it into age demographics. They'll break it into ethnic demographics. So you really get a clear picture of where you, as an end consumer, are spending your money. Are you going to spend your money going to buying the Taylor Swift tickets and going to the Taylor Swift concert? Are you going to spend your money going out to a nice dinner with your family or your friends or your significant others to impress them? Or are you spending it on upgrading to the latest iPhone or iPad, right? All of those are choices that you need to make with how you spend your money, and different people are focused on different areas. So demand science takes all this information and distills that for me, for my segment role, into how does that translate to our volume demands. So this is the group that is looking at and measuring on a constant basis, what is our expected volume going to be? What is it on a year-over-year basis? What is it projected to be going forward? And then that volume signal triggers what we're expected to deliver in net sales, and it triggers the planning so that our manufacturing plants can make enough of the product so that we have it on shelf. Mm-hmm. The other way that we look at market research and we think about that external environment is every period, so we have 12 periods a year, every period we do a deep dive in different areas of my segment. So I mentioned some of the brands that are in my segment. We have those brands that roll up into 3 different areas. Every period, that brand team is sitting and talking about how did we perform? What is the market share? How did we perform? They also do a deep dive into our different key retailers. So we don't disclose our retailers publicly other than Walmart. We do quite a bit of business with Walmart. So you can imagine Walmart, other places where you would typically go and buy food, right? So we do a deep dive on how is that environment? How are those retailers doing? We do a competitive analysis, right? So for every one of my brands, I have a different set of competitors. So we're constantly looking at how did we do, how did the competitors do? It's a lot of data, right? And so one of the things that I would suggest to you all as business majors, you need to be comfortable dealing with data. And you also need to be comfortable learning how to take that data and roll it up and use that data to make good decisions. But we do a lot of analysis that helps us inform our go-forward path.
Yes. And I imagine AI plays into this. So we talk about AI a lot on campus here. Mm-hmm. Tell us about what's happening inside of your shop with AI.
Mm-hmm. So we are, at Conagra, we're a Microsoft shop. So we have Microsoft Copilot. We started actually piloting Copilot within a specific group within our company, someone in the demand science organization. Kind of took it as a pilot. It pulled a few people in from different pieces of the organization and said, where do we really think the best use cases are for us to advance this? So we did not immediately roll Copilot out to everyone. We started small. We developed experts. We now are rolling that up to what in corporate we call centers of excellence, right? Individuals that are experts in an area that they can then act as resources for other groups that are trying to learn how to use things. The other thing we have done is specific for finance. We are rolling out specific finance training for how to better use AI and automation. Because we have people that are at various ends of the comfort spectrum. So I met with some student groups this morning and I said, quite honestly, you are all probably way more comfortable using AI than I am. You are probably way better experts from,
they do it on their assignments.
Right, from ChatGPT. and so you probably have learned how to ask questions in a way that give you the best immediate pieces of information. Some of us in finance, we're still learning how to do that. So we determined that having a center of excellence specific for finance made the most sense so that we can bring everyone along in a consistent way and make sure that no one is being left behind.
Terrific, terrific. So let's switch over to some of the interests the students may have over the next couple of years. We'll get there. You've been recruiting on campus with Conagra. Can you tell me what is your company looking for right now, and what are you seeing?
Yep. So Conagra, we come to campus for a number of, we're a very large company. I think we probably have somewhere between 150 and 200 Purdue alums that are within the entire company. And this is corporate offices. These are our manufacturing facilities. So engineers, food scientists, R&D individuals, as well as logistics experts and corporate finance experts. I know for sure that we were at the most recent career fair, and we do recruit for sales, and we recruited for corporate finance. So what do we look for? When we come to campus, we look for individuals that are interested in the company, right? So you've all probably been to the career fairs. Some booths, have a long line. We do pay attention to who comes up to the booth. We pay attention to the conversations. We pay attention to who's asking questions. So we can pretty easily tell who's read some information about Conagra, who's read our most recent 10K, who's looked at the press releases, who's looked at what's recently in the news. Oftentimes you have a really limited amount of time when you're talking to someone to make an impression. And so what sets you apart in that process is how you handle that 1 to 3 minutes with someone, right? We did, in order to help move things along, we went from having printed copies of our materials to a scan code so that you can all scan information and connect it to Handshake and do the interviewing and the application process that way. The other thing that we look for then is, I'd say, how to differentiate yourself from the application through the interview and the offer process. So step one for individuals who are seeking a job is that first initial impression. And quite honestly, some of you may not be able to talk to people because there's a very long line at the booths. So you scan the information. We do a pretty good scan through resumes. So I know what the core is for Daniels. I know all of the classes that you've all had some exposure to. Purdue is one of our target schools. It's not the only target school, but we've also done some benchmarking. So I know what sets Daniels apart from some of the other schools that we look at. When you actually get into the process, if you are selected for an interview, our questions are all behavioral type questions. So really important that you put in your prep work and you think about how you are really answering those questions. What are your bullet points that you want to use to help set you apart from other people that might be going through the process? The more specific examples that you can give, the better it is. So I would suggest to you, use your case studies, use your teamwork, use those examples that you're seeing every day and figure out how to translate that into the right bullet points, and then figure out how to do it concisely. Another thing we recently added in our interviews is some questions about technology. So data analytics, really important piece of all of our jobs. We actually reached out to our financial modernization group, which sits under our FP&A, financial planning and analysis team, and specifically asked, what areas of tools and technology do you think people should have some exposure to, right? Excel modeling, super important for any type of role in finance. Exposure to different databases, really important. Again, we're a Microsoft shop. We use a tool called Power BI. It sits as a dashboard on top of our various other systems that encompass and coordinate data. So Power BI is something we're using right now. Power BI may not exist in 5 years. So it's less about exposure to the tool and more about how you can communicate your comfort with these different data systems to think about how you can use that and get familiar with the next tool that's coming out. So I'd say all of those steps along the way are what I would suggest to people that are going through interview processes, whether it's for internships or for full-time positions, because those are the things that will help set you apart.
And so I heard Excel,
Yep.
and I heard familiarity with database.
Yep.
Could you go back on behavioral one more time, just
Yep.
so we all understand what we mean by behavioral?
So behavioral questions. Tell me about a time. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated leadership. Tell me about a time when you had to handle conflict. Describe the situation to me and tell me what you did to resolve it. And if you look back on that, did you learn anything in the process that you would do differently next time? So being able to really concisely talk about examples of things that you have done and what helps to set you apart are super key. So the more specific that you can be in describing an example, and again, for undergrad students, you may not have all had internship opportunities, but pretty much everyone has been doing some casework. You've all worked with teams. You've all had team members that have been not performing very well, right? Nods? Great. So how do you handle that, right? How do you motivate a team? How do you make sure that you are properly stepping up and correcting any behaviors, whether it's a job, it's a family situation, or it's a case situation? I guarantee you, you have all had experiences that translate into a behavioral question.
Yeah, we do a lot of teamwork exercises in college, and as you say, that's right ground for building stories for going to interviews. So how does somebody, maybe you've answered the question already, Melissa, but how does somebody get to an offer? They've done the good 2 to 3 minute pitch, they're interested in the company, they've covered a couple of the points we've just discussed. What gets somebody an offer at your company?
So it's a competitive process, right? It is a competitive process. So I think it's the combination of our familiarity with the schools and the environment. So again, this is where Purdue's Plus, as I mentioned, it's a target school for us. It's that demonstrated interest, and it is also in the interview process, you showing interest in us. So you're selling yourself to us, but you're also showing interest in us by asking the right questions to make sure that we're a good fit for you. So I think it's a good level of communication, and the more specificity that you can have in the responses. And then finally, Dave, I would say that demonstrated interest. So asking during your interview process, because I guarantee you, at the end of your interview processes, companies should leave some time where they will say to you, do you have any questions for me? So when I interview, and when I have interviewed, I'm always curious what people ask me. And so people will often ask, where do you see the company going in the next few years, right? So it's questions that you can easily get if you've done a little bit of research online. Sometimes we'll get questions if people have a particular interest in an area. We'll sometimes get questions about our sustainability efforts, but typically the questions about growth, questions about corporate culture. Another really important area that we pride ourselves on, every company's culture is going to be a little different. So we often get questions on what's the culture like at Conagra? You know, is it a competitive environment? Is it a collaborative environment? How much exposure might you get to senior leadership? How does senior leadership communicate the strategy? It's another really good question for you to ask.
So now somebody's been hired and they're a couple years into their career at your firm. How do people separate themselves from the pack, set themselves apart?
Yep. So what I have seen for new hires, and especially new hires that haven't necessarily done internships, I'll give you some really specific examples. So one, it's kind of the basic stuff, right? Show up to work on time. If you have a 9 o'clock meeting and you have a 9 o'clock meeting with a vice president in your company, Do not show up to work at 5 to 9, where you're just coming in, you have to get your computer up and running, you have to get started, right? So every company is going to have different hours. Typically, companies have a core, but then they also, some people at Conagra come into work at 7, they may leave at 3 or 4 to take a train home. Some people may come in at 9, if they can, and then they're working until 6, right? So just be aware of the perception. I would not, particularly when you're newer in your career, I would not only come in at 9 and I would not plan on leaving at 4. If you're in any type of a finance role, understand that finance is not always a 9 to 5 job. That periodically may mean sometimes you may have to check email, you may have to do some work over a weekend. If you're working in corporate, you're a salaried employee, you're not being paid hourly. So if you're working, for example, in the corporate accounting function and you're 2 weeks out before your 10Q is due, don't take vacation the week before. Don't come in and tell your boss, hey, yeah, I'm taking a trip over the weekend and my work is going to be on hold and it's going to come, I'll have to deal with that when I get back.
Do you see these kind of behaviors?
We do. Oh. We do. So this is why I am giving you specific examples of things that we have seen. You've probably heard by now, making sure that when you're communicating in a corporate setting, that you're communicating using professional language. You're all probably used to doing texting with emojis or different abbreviations. Obviously, that doesn't work in corporate either. If you're writing an email, and a lot of times email is still used, we all also use other systems. We have one called Teams where it's more instant messaging. But all of that information is saved, so it's all discoverable. So making sure that your communication is also as professional as possible, very key. Wardrobe and appearance can also sometimes come into play. I have been at companies where we have sent individuals home because they have not dressed appropriately. Sometimes corporations have had dress codes, and I will say dress codes have become more casual. So pretty much what you're all wearing in the room, you would generally be fine, at least at Conagra. Every Thursday we do a Pride Day in terms of a sports Pride Day, so people will wear their undergrad or their graduate schools or jerseys from their favorite professional team. What we typically don't support are shorts or super short skirts or t-shirts that have what could be deemed offensive slogans on them. So just paying a little bit of attention to things like that as well.
So Melissa, how did you scale the ladder? What were your tricks?
So if you guys have seen and you heard a little bit about my background, I've done a lot of different things in corporate. Mm-hmm. So I started my career in public accounting. I worked for a regional public accounting firm in Pennsylvania. Decided that wasn't what I wanted to do, went back full-time for my MBA, which I got from the University of Notre Dame, which is how I ended up in the Midwest. And when I started my career, I left public accounting because I didn't want to do public accounting anymore, and I started my career in corporate in internal audit. Now, internal audit, not the same as external public accounting. Great place to start a career because it really gives you very broad exposure to all kinds of different functions within an organization. Because I'm an accountant, I'm very curious by nature. I ask a lot of questions, and I really like to get to the why of things. After doing internal audit for a number of years, I made a complete switch in a career path and moved into the investor relations role. So internal audit is all about process. It's all about a very deep understanding of how things work. Investor relations is all about how do you pull up and communicate at a high level and talk to people about a company and answer questions behind questions. And also be careful in how much you communicate because investor relations is regulated. There are certain things that I cannot say in investor relations. If I'm talking to an analyst who's interested in getting information about the company, they're going to ask me things that they know I can't tell them. because they want to see what I say, or they
Such
want to
as
see
forecasts, right?
yes, forecasts, specific. Where do you expect? What do you expect Slim Jim to deliver in 3 years? I can't share that information. I had the opportunity to take Treasury on as well. After my one company decided to execute a split and a spin, and Investor Relations was dealing with a smaller base, so I had the opportunity to take on Treasury. Treasury was a fabulous complement to Investor Relations, because in Treasury you're talking about cash, right? You're talking about debt and you're talking about cash. Investor Relations, for the most part, you're talking about the P&L, your growth opportunities, your margin. What does your cost structure look like? What does your EPS look like, your earnings per share? Those are the metrics that you're measured on. Treasury is all about managing the balance sheet, managing your levels of debt. What debt is available? How often do you space that debt out? What is the cost of refinancing debt or retiring debt? And looking at free cash flow, which is, of course, another key metric for how investors analyze a company. So after doing that for a number of years, I did it in public. I went to a company that was private equity owned, a private equity meaning it was not a publicly traded company. And I had the chance to take that. This was US Foods. I joined them when they were private equity owned. I joined them to help them get their investor relations department up and running, help them prepare for how to become a publicly traded company. And then moving back to Conagra, had the chance, of course, to do the 3 different roles here. So what I have always employed in my career is, I call it take the leap. So when someone brings an opportunity to you, you may love the job you're doing. I can tell you, I was a better investor relations person for having had experience in Treasury. I was a better segment CFO for having experience talking to the external investors, because I could bring that external perspective to the business and say to the business, you may be really proud of this, but that's not what investors care about, right? Investors care about these external functions. Investors know how you want to grow. Investors want to know what you're going to do to improve margins. So really making sure the business is hyper-focused on those areas was very important. And then in my new role as corporate controller, I will be a better corporate controller from having had the experience and exposure in the business side. So I would tell you all, be curious, ask questions. Most companies now operate very cross-functionally. The more you put yourself out there and ask questions, do informational interviews, talk to people in different areas of your businesses to think about what you may want to do. And don't be afraid to move into an area that you don't have experience in. So have confidence in yourself that the skills that you are building up will transfer with you as you go along.
Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Executive Forum Speaker Series. Learn how the Daniels School is building the future of business by visiting us at business.purdue.edu. That's business.purdue.edu.